There's two types of discrimination here that we're dealing with. And one of those goes to a very fundamental right granted to every American through our Constitution, a cherished value of freedom of expression and religion. And I believe this bill violates that freedom and diminishes it.
As Senator Dan Coats, Republican of Indiana, this past Thursday, right before legislation protecting gays and lesbians from workplace discrimination passed the Senate with 10 Republican votes. Dan Coats was not one of them. And now attention turns to the Republican-controlled House. Joining us now to discuss the bill's prospects in the lower chamber is the executive director of the Log Cabin Republicans, Gregory Angelo. And Gregory, I appreciate you joining us today. I guess the first question I just ask you is sort of, when we look at public opinion on an issue like gay marriage, for instance, one thing that always jumps out at me is the country is moving, it's sort of past majority support now. Most polls now put support for that in the mid-50s, maybe even into the high 50s. But the breakdown is stark. When you go Democrats, it's like around 80% or so. When you look at independents, it's well over 50%. When you look at Republicans, it's down at like 20%. And it's the same thing when you poll other questions about gay rights. With Republicans, it is just dramatically lower, not just with Democrats, but with independents. What is it that makes the Republican Party in general so hostile is the word that comes to mind to legislation like ENDA?
Well, you know, first, a couple of things come to mind regarding the marriage issue. While you say that the numbers are low for Republican support of civil marriage for committed same-sex couples, the fact is the numbers are growing. The fact is also that there is considerably more support for civil marriage for same-sex couples among Republican millennials. So there's definitely a generation gap there. Also, you know, I will say that my discussions, whether it's about civil marriage for committed same-sex couples with Republicans or the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, the fact of religious liberty is something that comes up repeatedly among Republicans. So when it comes to the marriage discussion, I'm always out there front and center pointing out the difference between civil marriage, which is a piece of paper you get from the government that says that you are married in the eyes of the law, and then holy matrimony, which is a sacrament that occurs in a church that is between two people and their priest and God. And that's, we're obviously fighting for the former, not for the latter. Religious exemptions are also something that we're pointing out in the version of ENDA as it exists right now. There are a number of Democrats and people on the left, organizations who are not happy with those religious protections. And so what we're saying as Log Cabin Republicans is that if you support religious liberty, you need to support this version of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act because it protects those liberties. And if the Democrats pass this bill as they would like to, they would run roughshod over those religious liberties.
So take for instance like the proposed Toomey Amendment. So we had the Portman Amendment that was adopted. The Toomey Amendment would have gone farther and said basically any religious affiliated organization has any sort of ties to religion that doesn't want to hire gay people, doesn't want gay people working for them because they're gay. Do you think they should be allowed to do that, to say we don't want to hire gay people?
We were not supporters of the Toomey Amendment to the Employment Non-Discrimination Act for the fact that we believe that the religious protections that exist right now in the bill are the cleanest and they're also the strongest. The religious protections extend the same exemptions that exist for any religious organization covered under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act to any religious organization that would be applicable to the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. So we have 50 years of case law right now that backs up those religious exemptions. There's precedent that exists there. If we had passed the Toomey Amendment, it would have created actually more of a gray area. It would have actually created more litigation, and for that reason, we were not supporters.
Gregory, it's Jonathan Capehart. You mentioned Republican millennials a second ago, and it made me think of the GOP autopsy that we were talking about in the previous block, where quite a bit of ink was paid to the fact that for the Republican Party, for the future of the Republican Party, and to capture Republican millennials, the party should look to LGBT rights issues as a way of bringing in Republican millennials, basically to save the party. But as we've seen with lots of things talked about in that autopsy has been shunted to the side. So how do you get your party to focus on LGBT rights in a way that not only brings in Republican millennials, but brings in those moderates out there who would love to vote for the Republican Party were it not so mean-spirited?
You know, I don't know that those recommendations of the RNC's Growth and Opportunity report have actually been shunted to the side, as you say. It certainly doesn't fit the mainstream media's narrative that there are these roadblock Republicans, but for anyone that says that it's impossible to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act in this Republican-controlled House of Representatives, or that LGBT protections are not something that this Republican House is looking to pass, I would point out the fact that this House has already passed LGBT protections in this Congress. It passed the Violence Against Women Act, which included protections for LGBT individuals, both protections about sexual orientation and gender identity. It passed with the votes of 87 Republicans, and House leadership, including Speaker John Boehner, allowed this bill to come to the floor, allowed their members to vote their conscience, and they knew that it would pass. So the fact is there is movement there.
I appreciate the point there, but so on this question of ENDA, though, so this, if you're saying there has been movement since the 2012 election, do you expect in this Congress that the House of Representatives, the Republican House, will take up and pass ENDA, and would you consider it a failure and proof that they did not learn from the autopsy if they don't?
Well, number one, you know, I think that the Violence Against Women Act and its passage really gave us as an organization a roadmap to pass ENDA, and showed me that while passage of ENDA in this Congress with this Republican-controlled House may be difficult, it certainly is not impossible. The fact is, if you have significant push from members of Congress who have already stated their support and their co-sponsorship of ENDA, and you have a similar and concurrent push among grassroots, especially among Republicans, 56% of Republicans nationwide say that they support ENDA. If you make sure that that pressure is there among constituents among Republicans, I think there is a solid chance that you will have House leadership allow their members to vote their conscience on this issue. But there has to be that pressure from within and from without.
Bottom line, then, do you expect that in this Congress, ENDA is going to pass the House of Representatives?
We have all options on the table right now. There are various means that we could pursue in order to see passage. We're just continuing to do the lobbying that we have always done, and I'm hopeful. I'm no Pollyanna, but I certainly see that there is a possibility for passage. And anyone that did not enter this lobbying fight thinking that we need to focus on both the Senate and the House shouldn't be lobbying for this bill in the first place.
Okay, as a long bottom line, but thank you, Gregory. Appreciate the time. I want to thank Gregory Angelo with the Log Cabin Republicans for joining us. Appreciate the time this morning. We will pick this discussion up right after this.